Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Promo Perspectives, podcast presented by Sage, dedicated to giving promotional products, suppliers, and distributors tips, tricks, and insights to help them grow their businesses. I am Gabe Gotai, Senior Marketing Coordinator here at Sage.
Patrick Harbot, Distributor Sales Team Lead here at Sage. I'm excited to be here, feeling like a official co-host.
I think you are the official co-host. Patrick joined us for a handful of episodes before when we were talking about fulfillment. We had a little break, did a series on marketing, and now we are coming back with a few episodes on decoration methods. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about kind of a bird's eye view of the most popular decoration methods, their pros and cons, the ins and outs, and how you have, good discussion, meaningful discussions in the front end and throughout the projects with your clients.
Yeah, so during this episode, we're going to talk about, Sage actually had posted a guide or published a guide. So those of you that are new to the industry, or maybe you're just not as familiar with the various different types of decoration methods, because there are a lot of them. Sage does have that guide that kind of give you that 30,000 foot view, a little bit more comfortability with those different methods. Then later in the episode, we're going to be joined by Ryan Feigenblatt from the Boca Ratonian to get an actual distributor's perspective on this. So there was a little bit of inspiration, for this episode. So Gabe, can you kind of tell us what created the vision?
Yeah,
if you will?
For sure. Well, honestly, most of this audience, you probably knew more going into this than Patrick and I did when we started preparing for this episode. We're not running distributorships working with decoration methods. True. But I had a thing come up in my life where a friend of mine plays music, and he was looking for shirts that he could sell, at his concerts and at his gigs. And him and I used to be in a band, and at that time, we had gotten some T-shirts made, and we needed them made quickly and cheaply, and we got exactly that. We got quick, cheap T-shirts that was perfect for our needs at the time. But now, as he wants this new shirt for his new venture, he was telling me what he didn't like about our old shirts. He didn't like that you could feel the design, that it felt very plasticky, kind of cheap, and it would go through the wash and the design would wear away. And for his new shirts, he had been to a different concert where somebody was selling shirts that had a full photograph printed on them, and you couldn't feel it. It was as if that was part of the shirt itself. So he reached out to me. He knew I worked in the industry, seeing if I could help him find out what he was really looking for. I reached out to a decorator local here in Texas who I'd met at Expo, and he gave me this wonderful kind of one-on-one on all of these different ways that you can print a graphic or an image on a T-shirt, the ins and outs, the pros and cons. It really opened my mind out going down this rabbit hole. I was able to share these options with my friend. He was able to see that to get what he wanted, which ended up being direct to garment, there was going to be a little bit more cost, maybe a little bit more time lead, but a higher quality product. And that really got me thinking about the trade-offs, and I thought it would be an interesting discussion for us to kind of have on the show. So, like Patrick said, we are going to start by going through the guide. I just put the link to that guide in the Zoom chat. Highly recommend you take a look at that. We're not going to have time to go over everything. It's going to be a very packed episode. But we are going to go over some of the high-level points. So, Patrick, why don't you kick us off and tell us about embroidery?
Yeah, embroidery, classic decoration method. So, as you probably can imagine, it's uses a thread and a needle to stitch designs directly into either a garment or a piece of fabric. So this is going to create that really dimensional, tactile look to that piece of apparel. Some things that people have to be mindful of is that the artwork is a little bit different, right? So, in some of these decoration methods, you're submitting AI or EPS files to your decorator, to your vendor. When it comes to embroidery, it does need to be digitized, right, into a stitch file before, they can actually plug it into the machine. So, I love embroidery. I think it adds a lot of value to a piece. So it's going to offer that high quality professional look and feel. It's extremely durable, so it's not going to really fade or tear apart in the wash if it's done right, of course. It's not going to fade and peel, like a plastisol paint might, like on a screen print or something like that. So most importantly, it's going to give you that premium touch to that particular garment. So makes it an excellent choice for corporate goods, like high-end polos, expensive bags, hats, things like that. So Works really good with the thicker fabrics. It doesn't have to be laid flat, so that's why you oftentimes do see hats get embroidered, because it doesn't have to be laid flat. So you're going to kind of see this, and it's not necessarily because things are bad or there's a real con to a particular type of decoration method, because a lot of it does depend on the type of garment or type of product, really. But we are going to kind of touch on some cons. So, when it comes to embroidery, it typically is a bit more expensive per piece. You're kind of limited, to if it's a real large or intricate design, it might be a little bit tougher just because of thread counts and thread colors and things like that. So, embroidery is easily one of, if not the top. There is definitely a big player in the room, which is screen printing. So Gabe, why don't you tell us a little bit about screen printing?
Yeah, I think a couple of years ago, before I worked in the industry, if you'd asked me, I would have told you screen printing was the only way to decorate a shirt. It's something that you can actually, as a member of the general public, you might see. I know I had seen people doing live screen printing at events because it's a cool looking machine, big circular, big hot inks pushing all these shirts up. But the way it works is you have to push the ink through a fine mesh stencil, and you are doing one color of ink per stencil. So if you're going to do multiple colors, you line those up, you set up each stencil, and it's like a circular machine, and you push each shirt up. This is really great for large order quantities because you do that one big setup and then you just run shirts through that process. Gives you really good vibrant colors that are opaque even on like a dark colored garment. The cons of it are going to be that it can have a bit of a feel to it. It's not going to be as bad as maybe a poorly done DTF, but it is still something that's not going to feel like it's part of the cotton or whatever you're using. It's going to be, because you need a different, for each color, you need a different stencil. You're going to be paying more for more colors, and you're not going to be able to do fine gradients or realistic images without some specialized inks or processes that could get more expensive. So kind of a counterpart to screen printing is going to be heat transfer printing. Before I throw that back to Patrick, just a quick tease. We are going to have a bonus episode. If you're listening to the podcast version of this show now, it'll be the next episode that comes out. If you're here with us live on Zoom, first of all, thanks so much for joining. We are going to post this everywhere you get your podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, everywhere in a few weeks. Go find Promo Perspectives and subscribe. But we're going to put out a bonus episode with an interview of Sarah Unruh from Stalls, and she's going to walk us through all kinds of different heat transfer methods. But again, Patrick, why don't you give us kind of that 30,000-foot view?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and if you guys have time to attend that episode in a couple weeks, I definitely recommend it. Sarah's just a wealth of knowledge on this type of stuff. It blew my mind on how much, I learned specifically just from her in that short period of time as far as heat transfers and all that goes. So basically what heat transferring is, it's designs are printed onto a special paper or a vinyl, a transfer paper or transfer vinyl, and then they're applied to the garment via, heat and pressure, right? So this encompasses a lot of techniques, and Sarah will talk all about that here in a couple weeks, but from DTF to digital heat transfers, full color. So it's excellent for those smaller quantity orders, personalized items like jerseys, uniforms, where you need a number on the back, a name on the back, allows for that full color, intricate design. So kind of like you were talking about earlier with your bandmate, where, you have the ability to put a photorealistic image on the actual product. Heat transfer is going to obviously help you out there. The setup costs are minimal when you compare it to something like screen printing. So can definitely be more cost effective. I think a lot of it, and you'll learn more as Ryan talks about this later in the episode, a lot of it does depend on the type of garment and the type of material. So again, it's going to have its cons, just like everything else, where, hey, it could be slightly stiffer, a little less breathable, especially if it's a big design on like the front of a t-shirt. You might be able to actually feel that when you're wearing it. It may, depending on who's doing it and the experience that they have, it could crack, it could peel over time. So these are just things to be mindful of, especially if the end user is actually improperly washing it. So Ryan's going to talk about a lot of that, where every person that does heat transfers or DTF, they're not one and the same, right? So there's no kind of exclusive method And again, Sarah will talk a lot more about that, when we do that interview with Stalls. But they go through a lot of testing, a lot of experimental process just to make sure that what they're doing is right, So it's important to make sure that you're working with a trusted decorator when you're doing things like DTF, because it can be done poorly. So let's kind of transition a little bit. I know apparel's the hot topic, and no pun intended, but let's kind of move into maybe some of the decoration methods you see on the hard goods. So one of my favorites, laser engraving. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Gabe?
Lasers are cool, right? What I really like about the laser engraving process is that, separate from everything we've talked about so far, is it's not about putting something onto the product. It's using lasers to remove material from that product and embed that design as a permanent engraving. Looks super high quality. It's very durable. It'll last a long time. Very, very professional look. The downside could be that you are going to be limited on colors, because the color of the decoration is going to be dependent on the material underneath the surface layer of whatever you're engraving. So decorators can get creative with the materials they use and the color that will come out, but you're not going to get really specific color matching on a thing like that. But again, it adds a level of elegance and sophistication to the product, and very long lasting. So it's a great option for that. Kind of similar. Can you tell us a little bit about embossing and debossing?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an elegant decoration method. You're going to see this on things like leather goods, some soft goods, but really what it is, it's a method where a die actually stamps to create either a raised or embossed or impressed or depressed, deboss design on that piece of material. So produces that real elegant, kind of subtle, highly sophisticated look on things like pad folios, leather goods. More than not, you're going to see it on leather goods. So those lawyers you see walking around with nice briefcases or nice pad folios, it's typically you're seeing it as a deboss, or in some cases an emboss, but. So definitely ideal for those types of products: notebooks, luxury goods, leather bags. Now it can be expensive, right? So especially if you're trying to do more intricate designs, that's where it does struggle. And Ryan will talk a little bit about that in his upcoming interview. But things like fine lines or real complex designs can make it a little bit tough or pretty pricey, because they do have to create that die to make that impress onto the product. So.
They do look cool, though.
It does. It does look great.
So, like we said, that was just kind of a bird's eye view of just some of the most popular methods. It's far from covering everything. Go check out that guide. I dropped the link in the chat. There's things in there that we didn't cover, like pad printing, puff embroidery, which is kind of a cool thing. So go check those out. So, as we've teased a few times, Patrick and I sat down with Ryan Feigenblatt. He is a distributor. He owns a company called the Boca Ratonian, so I'll let you guess where he's based out of. And we talked about how these cons to each of these decoration methods, right? They're not bad things. It's not what makes a decoration method inherently bad. It's what make it a poor choice for a specific project. So what we wanted to do was talk to Ryan about how do you have these conversations with your customers to determine the best decoration method for any given project, both those conversations before, throughout, and after. So we'll go ahead and kick off. We're going to play clips from his interview, and Patrick and I will come back in between those clips and talk about them. This first clip we've got is going to be Ryan introducing himself and the company and talking about some of those initial conversations with the customer.
My name is Ryan Feigenblatt. I'm an independent promotional products distributor in South Florida. I've started selling printing and advertising about 25 years ago, before high school, and morphed into promo later on in my career, probably about last 5 years or so, and really total brand and merch nerd. What makes my company unique is the attention to detail and care that I give to all of my clients and projects. Making sure that we always hit deadlines, that comes first and foremost. Basically providing the right product at the right time to the right client at the right price. Typically, I would have my standard set of questions that I ask clients regarding the project, of course, enhanced date, what they're looking to achieve, the quantity, hopefully a budget if they have one in mind. Then from there, if it's an existing client, I look at their previous artwork, of course, see how it could apply to that item, to the decoration method, to the material. And if it's a new client, typically I would always start by asking for their brand guide if they have it available. That way we could have the colors, the fonts, all of the pertinent information. If they don't have that, then of course I'll work with them on a more developmental design approach.
Yeah, I mean, what he said there, getting like the brand guidelines up front, that's such a crucial part because they may have an item in mind, and then based on their brand guidelines or the intricacies of their logo, he may have other suggestions to say, hey, because of this, this is what I would suggest. So I think that's a really important phase that if you're not doing that, I would highly recommend it. It's going to just help you streamline that whole process of having that conversation, helping yourself become more knowledgeable, but more importantly, preventing any potential disasters, once things go into production.
Oh yeah, I think a lot of sales and business people learn pretty early on that the importance of that first discovery process can save you a lot of time, headache, and money later on. Mm-hmm. So the next thing that we wanted to talk to Ryan about was, once he had a decoration method in mind, how do you go about having the conversation with that client and explaining these things to them? We covered those with our audience here, but you guys are in this industry, you're informed on what these things are. To the layman, to the end user, it's moon man talk, and so how do you go about crafting analogies and metaphors to explain those? And this is what Ryan had to say.
Typically, I would start explaining to the client, picture your logo in one color, very, very old school. Sort of picture like a tub of ink in one color, and an old school sort of stamp that comes in and captures that ink color in the shape of your logo, right? And then just literally dropping it on that product. So that's how I would start to explain a one color imprint in very, very layman terms. And then of course, with a full color, say a digital imprint, I would explain it as picture a full color glossy magazine, where you turn the pages, each page is just full color, unlimited colors. So the gamut has no limits. And then, of course, there's many other, decoration methods when you start to think about foil imprints, foil stamping. That's pretty easy to describe to a client who might not have the know-how, because I would say just picture a metallic that kind of has some, glimmer to it when you hold it different directions in the light. A deboss, for example, I would say just picture, a very high-end leather good that's basically imprinted without any color fill. But yeah, there's so many analogies that I could use to describe the imprint methods, decoration methods to clients.
I had somebody once explained to me that when you're talking with clients, you need to be able to explain things to them like they're 5 without making them feel like they're 5. Mm-hmm. And that's going to go a long way in helping them understand these decoration methods, because that also informs the kinds of products and materials that they can choose and the look and feel of all that kind of stuff.
For sure. Yeah, I think simplifying it, this is confusing stuff for someone that has no idea or no experience. So I think finding a way to simplify it, get creative with finding that way to simplify it, but I think that's going to be key. So after doing all that initial discovery, we wanted to learn more about Ryan's, how he went into explaining the actual look, the feel of some of these popular options that we actually talked about earlier in the episode. Which ones are the most common, what he might recommend for both apparel and hard goods. So let's see what he had to say.
I would say that screen printing is probably the most popular decoration method, and that probably just has to do with the efficiencies and the cost effectiveness when you get to quantity. So much could be done with screen printing in the apparel world, and there's so many great finishes in terms of making it soft hand, in terms of even color mixing. When you really need to hit that specific Pantone color, screen printing is the way to get it done. And that could also be achieved, of course, with pad printing and other decoration methods. As far as navigating constraints regarding decoration methods, I always like to advise clients that the material itself might impact how a color shows up. For example, with sublimation, you need 100% polyester or at least a very high poly count. So those colors actually tend to skew a little bit on the duller side, as opposed to, say, a cotton, where if we're going to do direct to that substrate, DTG, direct to garment, or a direct print, sometimes those colors show up a little more vibrant. Also, on that front, I always like to also let the clients know that depending on the imprint color and the actual item color, that might actually affect the appearance of the imprint as well. So for example, if you're printing a light color such as a sky blue on a black background material, if there's not an underbase, then the fibers even of that material might show through, skewing the color. So as far as decoration method applies to hard goods, when you say hard goods, there's so many hard goods that come to mind. I'll take the drinkware category as an example. Uh, in terms of a more luxurious premium finish, I always love to steer clients in the direction of laser engraving. That imprint is really durable. It's not going anywhere. It's part of the item itself, of course. And then if the artwork requires something that's a little more intricate, of course, love full color on drinkware as well. But I think that it goes with educating the client as well, letting them know, that the imprint's longevity might not be as long, especially if it's, tossed in a dishwasher, where it's more prone to those elements, those harsh chemicals that might affect the imprint. But then also, of course, with drinkware, we have that full color UV direct imprints, and really the technology there has also increased exponentially, allowing that piece to have that seamless 360 wrap around the item. So really, really getting beyond just the client's logo, but also being able to incorporate patterns and other brand elements into the piece. I mean, I love debossing when it comes to leather goods, as I mentioned. When you get into debossing, one concern is always the minimum font point size. Always want to make sure that it's large enough to avoid any what I would call like a fill. For example, the little triangle in an A might become solid if that font is below a specific size. But debossing is definitely an elegant decoration method.
Yeah, I mean, I think you did a great job covering what we would probably consider the most popular, most common. He kind of touched on the little bit at the end with the digital, full color digital on drinkware. So what we wanted to do was kind of get his perspective on, some of the new innovations, the new technology, that has him excited, right? So
Yeah, talking about like popular trends and things like that. That discussion, we ended up talking to him before he answered too about DTF, kind of shared that same story from earlier. And he was reiterating the same points that we'd made about how not all DTF is made the same. So yeah, let's hear what he had to say about all that.
Yeah, absolutely. DTF has totally dominated the market. There is a place and opportunity to use it, but it needs to be done right. So as far as DTF goes, I always, and that's the direct to film, of course. I always try to look at the design. I always recommend that a large solid area is not great for DTF, because it might have that, sort of quote unquote sticker feel. Not always, of course, because not all DTF is created equal. So there's definitely some more quality films out there, and powders and inks and methods, even the actual application, the heat press method that affects the hand, if you will, of that imprint. So, as far as achieving like a more luxurious feel, for example, in the apparel world, you could get into all sorts of fancy decoration techniques, such as discharge printing, water-based inks, where the imprint actually starts to feel more like it's part of the material rather than sitting on top of the material. And if it is sitting on top of the material, like a standard plastisol ink, that's fine too, of course. But again, that's achieved with the right designs and the right quite frankly, the right contract decorators decorating those designs. I think it also goes back to the old school aspect. Sometimes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Embroidery always is first and center, I think, in terms of a premium decoration technique. And even in the embroidery world, there's been innovations where you have companies like Color Rail, for example, where that's kind of a hybrid between taking thread that's one color and dyeing it during the application. That gives you that full color appearance that you're able to easily achieve gradients and more complicated, intricate designs. So I think that, decoration technology that's out there, the equipment, the processes, it's constantly evolving, right? I mean, that gives us really, the sky's the limit when it comes to decorating. So yeah, I mean, when you start to look at, new innovations in the world of decoration, you have stalls you mentioned earlier, and stalls, I mean, is really putting out unbelievable methods into the world. So, there, when you start to think about the patch application to an item, even as simple as a heat press, even if it's not sewn on, the dimension that some of those dimensional patches and transfers that a company like Stolz is offering really help increase the perceived value of that item.
Yeah. So one of the last things that we talked to Ryan about was kind of the importance of having a good relationship with your suppliers and decorators. Because like you said, you got to make sure you're working with trusted people and how you can help stay up to date on all those trends and best serve your clients.
For sure. Yeah, and working with like a Sanmar PSST, or we talked about this in the previous episodes, SNS's CDN network. A lot of these guys have access to these pieces of equipment, some of these innovations. I know Ryan probably uses people within those networks, gets samples. So lastly, he kind of talked about samples. I guess to kind of wrap it up, he talked about samples and just absorbing as much education as he possibly could. So this way he can approach these different conversations with these clients with some knowledge. So let's hear what he had to say, and then we'll probably wrap it up. I think we're pushing the time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm constantly educating myself. Just the opportunity to speak with suppliers one-on-one, walking show floors, attending Zoom calls, just like this one, for instance, constant education, listening to industry podcasts, watching even suppliers have great content on YouTube, really, really getting into the nitty gritty, understanding those decoration techniques. The last thing I want to do is bog one of my supplier reps down with questions, but they're always there if we need it as an absolute last resort, especially on those more complicated orders and artwork. I have a great relationship with my contract decorator, and quite frankly, it helps. No one wants those tiny onesie twosie orders, but we need to take care of our existing clients and help with those as well. But also it helps with the pre-production sampling process, because sometimes the shipping starts to get out of hand on those. So PSST from Sanmar is an amazing program. Yeah, I mean, I always encourage sampling. If it's an item that the client has not ordered prior, be happy to send them a sample. Make sure that it's something that will work for that project, because it's a lot less expensive to do that up front rather than redoing an entire order.
Yeah, I mean, he said it right there. I mean, educate yourself. Once you've kind of absorbed the knowledge and you have the ability to explain it to your customer, get those samples. I mean, people learn by touch, right? So we're kind of running out of time. I definitely recommend checking out the guide that Gabe threw into chat. PPAI has an online resource as well for decoration methods. So if you're new to the industry or you're just still a little wavy as far as your knowledge on decoration methods, I encourage you to check out those two guides. There's obviously tons of YouTube content out there. Touch base with your decorator, get samples, try and be a sponge, absorb as much as you can. So
definitely. And, like Ryan said, listen to industry podcasts and attend industry Zooms.
Do that too.
Somebody did send me a message here while we were going through asking if we were going to be posting this. Yep, it's going to go up. Now, if you're here with us on the Zoom now and not listening to the podcast later, you do get a good head start. It's usually about a month between the live stream and the episodes, but we have episodes coming out every week that are not live streamed, so go to YouTube, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, subscribe to Promo Perspectives. We are in the middle of putting out a series all about marketing. How do you market your small business? How do you work with a marketing team or without if you've only got a small team? Brand marketing, social media strategies, all these kinds of things. And in about 1 month, we are going to be posting this episode along with a bonus episode. I see somebody saying they don't see the guide in the chat. I'm going to put it in there one more time. You can also find this guide and a bunch of other great guides on the Sage. You go to sageworld.com and you click on resources on the top. We've got guides on things like decoration. We've got guides on how to break into specific industries. We've got stats, quarterly reports on industry activity. Check those out. Subscribe to the podcast, and hopefully we'll see you on the next live stream. We're going to be talking all about band merch. So thanks, everybody, for joining, and have a great day. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.